Hi friends, welcome to another episode of Complex Like Wine. This week we have someone I've known for quite a while, like in and out, just recently got back in contact with each other. Her name's Krystal, so I'm excited to introduce her to you guys. But of course, like always, we're going to start this podcast with wine, because this is the podcast where we talk about complicated things and learn to improve over time, just like wine does. So here's another Italian wine. This is a white blend, which I've never had a white blend before, so I'm kind of curious to see how I like this. But this is from the Pontera, however you pronounce that, region of Italy. And it doesn't say what type of grapes they use, but the winemaker is Sabino Russo, so you can look him up later. But this is from Calvari, however you pronounce that or want to pronounce it. But yeah, I'm just gonna taste it quickly and then cheers. I'll be honest, it's not my favorite, but it is not bad. It's pretty good. Definitely has some fruity notes to it. It's not very dry, I would say, but not incredibly sweet either. So I think this is gonna be like a good white for anyone that's just generically into whites. So interesting. I didn't really realize they made white blends. But anyway, we'll start off this conversation with Krystal. She's tuning in.
Hello, I'm Krystal.
How are you doing today?
Honestly, my mental health is struggling, so, I'm excited for today because I can relieve some of that stress,
Mm-hmm.
because definitely a big stressor in my life is my family, and as our topic is toxic family, they dang toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thankful that Krystal's talking with us today because this topic has been actually highly requested from people. So thank you for opening up with me, because we both understand the toxic parents, especially mothers, and being in a Latina household or Latin household. Like, there's also additional other things that come into it, but
Definitely.
yeah.
Thank you for having me too.
Of course. No, thank you. So do you want to introduce yourself or anything?
Yeah, so my name's Krystal Galindo. I met Zyra in high school. And already kind of touching on the topic of toxic family, I myself was very toxic, I feel, in high school because I feel like I learned how to interact with people through my parents. And for a majority of my life, I wasn't really allowed to go out places and see other people. So I was limited in my socialization. So I found myself looking back on those high school years and seeing myself treating others the way that my family would treat me. And I felt terrible about it. So there was a day where I contacted Zyra and I apologized. I wanted to own up for my responsibility for any position where I may have hurt her or made her feel uncomfortable or anything, and wanted to extend an olive branch. And yeah, that's kind of where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, sorry, continue.
But a little bit more about me. I'm currently in school working on my bachelor's to get a psychology degree. And right now I'm currently interning at a place for counseling. And so I'm kind of learning, just more and more tools and things that I can use not only in my professional life, but also in my daily life, working with others or communicating with others. So I'm excited to share some things today.
Yeah, I think this episode's going to be really insightful since you have your background in psychology and everything you've learned and also have experience and kind of processed through. So I think for those like me too that are learning that or are curious and learning more of the actual facts and background and the way people work, I think this is going to be a really interesting episode.
Awesome. I do want to say that I'm in no way a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist or anything like that. I'm just somebody who's learning, and I hope that your listeners today will gain something that they can put in use in their daily life.
I think they will. Well, I'll hand you the floor. Go ahead. You can share your story and then everything diving into toxic families, relationships, and how to navigate that.
Of course. So my family is Latin. My parents both immigrated here from their respective countries. My mom is Cuban, so she grew up in an environment where they had no food. They had, um, just no money. They have like I remember I went recently to Cuba, and because I still have family living there. And I went with my aunt to go see how they go about getting their food. And they have this little book that tells you how many people are in the house. And then you take it up to this government person or whoever it is, and that person gives you an amount of potatoes based on how many people you have in the house. But you can't have any more than that. So they got like one potato per person. Um, but I noticed that they were running out. And so, it was very interesting to see how my mom grew up. Um, and then my dad, he was a military officer in Colombia. In Colombia, they're kind of the military and the police are kind of connected in a way. And then his dad and his dad's dad, and a lot of the men in his family, and even some women, are in law enforcement. And the funny thing is, he actually came to the States because one of his officials. This was during the time of Pablo Escobar. It was right before Pablo Escobar started doing all kinds of crazy things like putting a number on police officers' heads. This was around the time when he was already in a political position, so that the United States couldn't extradite him. But he got fired for being too strict, for following the rules too much, because it was a very corrupt government. And so he came to the States. And so I feel like both of them brought a lot of their values from their respective countries and kind of merged them. Um, and raising their children, it's me and my brother. Raising us was interesting, to say the least. I was very, very sheltered my entire life. I had different rules than my brother, which is a part of the typical Latin household where the women have to clean and cook, and they can't go outside, or they can't go to their friends' houses, but the men can do anything they want pretty much, because they're the baby boys, and that's what they value. But yeah, there's just been a lot of instances recently where I realized, when I'm looking back on how I grew up and what I experienced with my family, that really showed me how toxic my family is. And I realized it's not just my main family. It goes to my grandparents, it goes to my aunts and uncles, it's starting to go to my younger cousins. And I'm just grateful that I have been able to get an education so that I can realize what they might be doing wrong and what I can do for myself to protect myself, and also to be able to change that in the future, because I would never want one of my children to feel the way that I felt while growing up. Like I said, my parents were very, very controlling. Even now, if I want to go to get food or something, I have to ask my dad, and say if it's like 9:30, he'll be like, "Nah, you can't go. It's too late." So they've always been just very, very controlling in that aspect. But in terms of my mom, who I feel is my most toxic family member, um, she she's kind of difficult to explain. She's very passive aggressive. She will not listen to what you have to say. She has this thing about herself that she feels she is the absolute best person in the world. Absolutely nobody can compare to her. And anybody who tries to say anything different, she doesn't care what you have to say. She doesn't care if you think that she has to change. She thinks she's absolutely perfect. Um, and so growing up in an environment like that, she didn't teach me to be confident in myself. So I've always felt insignificant. I've always felt less than. I've always felt like I'm taking up too much space in my family. And so, kind of going off of that, I want to talk about different signs that show that you have grown up in a toxic family, because a lot of people, they might try to excuse somebody's actions, but in reality, it's how you are that really shows where you've been. So, a few of them are: you're expected to meet unrealistic standards. Your standards are not the goal. Your family's standards and your family's happiness is the goal. They can reach like a certain level of achievement. You need to put your life on hold for them. There are also kinds of things like being harshly criticized, or if you yourself harshly criticize yourself. Sorry, words. But when you're being so harshly criticized in your day-to-day life, you really don't see anything different, and you kind of form a negative outlook on your life. Something else is you've been or continue to be infantilized. So you're told that you're not mature, you're not intelligent, you're not competent enough to control certain aspects of your life. And so the decisions are made for you as a result. Or they can go about it in a more low-key kind of way. They don't directly tell you that you're not mature or smart enough, but they make you feel like you are. And they're like, oh, that decision you're trying to make isn't really the best one, so you should actually do this. A lot of manipulation happens in these toxic families. And boundaries is a very, very huge thing. A very, very huge thing. You try to set your boundaries. Like personally with me, the other day I tried to set some boundaries with my mom, kind of telling her, if you speak to me in these kinds of ways, I'm not going to respond, but I would be okay with taking a break, you and I allowing you to calm down, and then we can revisit the conversation. And she just refuses to do that. She wants to have a conversation whenever she wants, not factoring you into any of that. Something else that a lot of toxic families do is comparing you to siblings, friends, or relatives, which really makes you feel like you're not doing good in life, like you're not taking care of things that you need to take care of, because in your eyes, you feel like you need that approval of your family. And so if they're constantly comparing you to someone else, it's just really putting you down rather than pushing you to go forward. And then I would say the biggest sign is, well, one of the few biggest signs is you feel anxious when you're with them and you're drained when they're gone. You're in a situation where you're with them and you're like, oh dear, what are they going to say? How are they going to hurt me today? Or what are they going to say to make me upset? And then they leave and you feel empty. You feel like you've given all of yourself to that conversation, because they're like energy vampires. They just suck it all up. They want to take as much as you have. And yeah, those are some signs that you were raised in a toxic family. There's so many web pages out there that have a longer list of like 30 or 40 different things. So I would definitely suggest, if you're interested, to go and look into those signs. But yeah.
Yeah, that's all of those are very true. And it's for every family or kid, like someone in a peer group that's undergone a toxic family member or even a friendship.
Mm-hmm.
You might connect to all of them. You might connect with one or two. I think for me, as you were listening, there was a few that I was like, yep, I definitely have experienced that growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely will affect the way you interact with people, the way you interact in relationships, and the way you see yourself and everything. And like you said, boundaries, especially, I think you end up viewing the way boundaries is skewed, and
Mm-hmm.
learning how to have a healthy relationship with boundaries for yourself, not for others. That's a huge one.
Definitely. Definitely, yeah. I personally, I'm in therapy and things like that, and boundaries is one of the biggest things that I'm working on. Um, and I feel like I still struggle so much. I'm not able to not only decide what is best for me, but to be able to recognize the right choices because I'm constantly questioning myself. And then I get it in my head that I'm like, oh, I need to ask my parents. I need to see if this is okay with them. Whereas they're not making those thoughts in to include me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, therapy has helped me a lot with being able to recognize the boundaries and learning that if other people are comfortable because you're establishing boundaries, that's also to be expected because they've been so rooted in the same routine of how conversations or dynamics work. And once you kind of set your foot down of how you want to establish things for yourself or set boundaries or take control of how you react to situations, you can't expect for family members to react or be on board right away. It takes a lot of time and effort, and some people just never get it. Right now, I'm reading a book called How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole Lipera. And yesterday, I just finished the chapter on boundaries, and it's all about how patterns from your past can affect your now and how to realize that, to adjust and change, and the whole boundary aspect of her giving examples of how to establish those is maybe the communication aspect, like you tried to do with your mom, or maybe it's not even kind of letting people know what you're doing. You start setting boundaries for yourself. So if you have too much time with family that's toxic for you, you limit that time because for what's good for you, not for them, and a bunch of different ways. But to go back to you, so with therapy, how have you noticed that that's kind of now helped, or have you seen any progress from before with you growing up in a family like that?
I have only recently been able to actually stand up to my parents, or there was actually recently a day where they were talking about somebody they knew who was getting physically abused by a significant other. And they were talking about how it was her fault and how it was this and that. And the old me would have just stayed quiet, wouldn't have said anything. And instead, I chose that moment to educate them and to let them know that, hey, that's not necessarily, oops, sorry, that's not necessarily the situation that you think it is, regardless of what somebody has done in their past. I don't believe that people deserve bad things that happen to them, which is basically what they said. Um, and so I've been trying to stand up to them and speaking to them in a way where I educate them on topics I find is helpful rather than voicing my opinion. Because if I voice my opinion, they overlook it like I said, they're infantilizing me. Like I'm too young. I don't really know what I'm talking about. Like in terms of when I'm taking medication, um, I was on antidepressants, anti-anxiety, a bunch of different kinds of medications, and I was trying to vent, trying to talk about how I'm feeling about the medications because I was frustrated that more were getting added on. And I swear we have this conversation like every few weeks, but they were like, you don't need the medication. All you need to do is just get out of the house, go work and be happy. And I'm like, maybe for you, for somebody who isn't necessarily experiencing those things, that could be manageable. But for me, it doesn't matter where I am, what I'm doing. If I feel that way, I'm going to feel that way regardless. And it was a very difficult conversation, and they kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me to get me to stop taking my medication. And my brother, who is studying to be a nurse, was in this conversation. And he told them, if she does stop taking her medication, she would have suicidal thoughts. She could attempt suicide because that's a risk of getting off of your medication. And hearing that, they didn't really care. They thought they think you can manage it. So I feel like I've, not only me but my brother as well, have been really trying to educate them and set those boundaries. Like you said, I limit how much time I'm with them. I try to avoid conversations if I know that they're not going to go anywhere, if I know that they're not going to listen. I avoid those conversations for my peace of mind, because that's what I need to be protecting right now. But real quick, I wanted to touch on the different roles in a toxic family, because
please.
This one I found interesting. So first, we have the abuser. The abuser is the person at the center of the family universe simply because they demand that position. And then we have an enabler. The enabler has authority and allows the abuser to take place. They're often simply happy to stand by and watch. They generally don't try to go against the abuser because they themselves don't want to feel abused,
Mm-hmm.
The flying monkey is like a remote control for the abuser, a way to reaffirm their messages, control the victim, and inflict abuse when the victim is away. And then we have the golden child, who's a child that's placed above all the rest. They can do no wrong, and they're shaped in the image of the abuser. And then we have the scapegoat, who can never do anything right, even though they have exceptional talents and achievements. They're seen as failures. And then finally, we have the peacekeepers. They're similar to the enabler. Oops, sorry, my computer disappeared. So they're similar to the enabler, but they lack authority. So a child will try to keep the toxic family together, and the peacekeeper is oftentimes manipulated. So is there a certain family role that you see yourself with your family?
Oh, that's a really good question. When my mom was around still, I think... so I think post my mom leaving, I've become the peacekeeper just because I was raised to say, pick your battles. Because my mom would always need a reason to start an argument or a fight. And I was taught that, there's no need to enable her. Just if you can, stay quiet. That way there's no added fuel to the fire. And so I think that has created me as a peacekeeper. And until recently, now I've gotten to the point where I'm allowed to speak my mind in a constructive way, though. That's also something to keep in mind. Like, you can't just start saying shit because you're angry. You have to do it constructively. Be proactive and productive about it.
Definitely.
But during, I'm not sure that I might have to reflect on that. That's actually a really good thing to reflect on. And I would encourage listeners to really think about your family dynamics and see who you are and what you could do about it to become a more healthier position.
Definitely. I think, being able to recognize what position you are in gives you tools to research and to educate yourself on how to not be in that role. Like, I myself at one point was the flying monkey who would do literally anything they say. And, seeing this, I see that it's telling me that I need to be more firm with myself, with my own choices. I need to learn how to say no and how to take care of myself, so definitely Google toxic family roles and, just look into them a little bit. And then that'll also help you to understand how the toxic family works.
Mm-hmm. I think for kids out there that had a parent that was the abuser and the other parent the enabler because they didn't want to cause strife, with their significant other, whether it's the mom or dad, and they're also struggling with internalizing, like, why is my other parent not doing anything about it or defending me? And I think, like you said, doing some research, understanding, thinking from the other perspective, I feel like that's also kind of a gateway to doing some like inner child work.
Definitely, or
Right.
reparenting.
Yeah. Today in the book, I just read the chapter of reparenting. It's funny that you mentioned that. I had never heard of the term reparenting until today. And like right now, you sharing about it. And I wish that was something I had learned years ago when I was in the midst of with my mom still around and dealing with the divorce. When during the time we were in high school, I was dealing with all of that. And so I'm thankful now that I'm able to place to talk about it and read and be more self-aware. And like you, we're able to talk about it now, and hopefully it gives some other people insight that are going through it currently.
Definitely. And, on the topic of reparenting, I think you're never done reparenting because, you'll probably be 40 years old and suddenly realize that you have some sort of quality of somebody or somebody else that you didn't like as a child. So you need to reteach yourself how to not be that way, or you need to, kind of teach yourself how to be there for you, which, it sounds simple, but honestly, being there for yourself is incredibly hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy that you're reading on the topic of parenting, reparenting. Maybe we can have a podcast
Yes.
about that. That would be nice.
No, I definitely think there's a lot of different topics we could go over, whether it's kind of the spirituality aspect that when we first got reconnected, we spent a long time talking about that. Parents, reparenting, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So definitely look out for more Krystal in the future episodes, people.
Hopefully I want to know you guys. But I wanted to move on to how to deal with your toxic family.
Yeah.
I do think reparenting is great for yourself, but in terms of actually communicating with them and dealing with them and managing situations with them is important, because if you continue to stay in situations that are draining you, that are leaving you questioning your own morals, it can really change you as a person. And you need to be strong while you're dealing with a toxic family. So some of these things could really, really help. So I think one of the biggest things is finding solid support. Like I myself have never been able to communicate with my parents about a lot of things. And in high school, I only had honestly, one friend who I would be okay talking to things about, but I still wouldn't talk to them about everything. But now I have a few different friends, and those few different friends interact with me in different ways when I'm feeling some kind of way and I need support. Like I have a friend who she and I will talk for hours and hours about all kinds of things and delving into the topic to see where it comes from, why do I do that, or I do the same with her. I have other friends who, we just sit together and we watch movies, we drink wine or something, and we just enjoy our time. So it's important to find different outlets and different friends who approach I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, who approach the difficult situations that you're in differently. Because then, if you're feeling extremely drained, you're not going to be in the mood to talk about all of your thoughts and feelings for a long time. Sometimes you just want to sit in a room with someone and not say anything and just sit there, maybe take a nap. But just having the company of somebody is really, really beneficial. So also going back to, dealing with a toxic family, you want to become aware of yourself and decide what you want in life. I think a lot of Latin households can understand that our parents want us to follow in some similar footsteps that they did. They want us to have the same work ethic. Oftentimes, they want us to have what they didn't have, like going to school. But, going to school isn't accessible for everyone. And, sometimes you aren't the kind of person that would really enjoy school. So, there's so many different paths in life that you can take. And so, you don't necessarily need to decide what you want to do with your career for the rest of your life. Just pick a general area and, try out a job, figure out if you like it. If not, move on to the next one. You only have this one life. And so you need to live it for yourself rather than living it for your family or for your friends. And honestly, doing that for yourself will inspire so many people around you to do it for themselves as well. The next step is to focus on your personal goals and prioritize your needs. So, kind of going in line with the last step, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Do you want to um, maybe move out? Which is one of the actual steps. And then we also have detaching from topics that don't please you and let them know that you're not interested. This one's very, very important because it kind of prevents you from feeling that energy drain, from feeling like you aren't good enough. So, if it's sometimes difficult to kind of tell somebody, like, hey, I'm not down with this topic. I'm just going to get the fuck out of here. Just leave me alone, kind of stuff. So, honestly, what I do is like kind of a baby step. I just say that, like, oh, I have a meeting, so I'm gonna go to my room and join that meeting. But at a later time, when they're not so heated in the conversation, I'll let them know, hey, that thing that you guys were talking about, that wasn't okay. And then, if you're interested, you can educate them on your own opinion outside of the original topic because it generally gets a little bit too heated. But take control of what you want your ears to listen to, what you feel you need to be exposed or not exposed to. Um, the next step is to set healthy boundaries and learn to say no. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but setting healthy boundaries is really scary at first. So is learning to say no. But once you start doing little by little, and don't set like a huge boundary like when you're first starting. Set something small. Just be like, okay, if I'm doing X, Y, and Z, I need to be alone. I need to not be bothered, and I just need you to respect that. And then little by little, just kind of pulling the rope closer to you so that you get closer to your goal, which is having the healthy boundaries. Um, and, there's so many different ways to say no, not just straight up saying no, because I personally struggle with that, whether it be with family or even strangers. I generally sometimes use an excuse to get out of something or to say no. But I'm beginning to kind of dip my toes in to saying no and dip my toes into standing up against those things. Next is to seek guidance and move out if needed. I can't stress enough how incredible therapy is. Um, I do want to say that it might take some time to find a therapist who you genuinely trust and who will really work with you and your values and your morals. But once you find that person, it's like you're on a fast track to getting better. And I see my therapist as like one of the closest people in my life because she and I have such a close bond that I could literally tell her anything in the world and she'd walk me through it, or she'd be there to give me support that I need from family, and then moving out if you need it. This is something that I would love to do, but I am not able to just yet. Um, but, just simply separating yourself from the household where you have certain memories or where you can hear them and you immediately get irritated. Just doing that will be so beneficial towards your health that you'll be able to make leaps and bounds with your healing. And then there's another step, which is cutting them out. And this isn't for everybody. Some people are able to manage a distant relationship, but other people feel like it's necessary to cut a family member out, which is totally valid. I myself can't necessarily speak on that because I haven't cut a family member out of my life just yet. But maybe you could provide some insight on that.
Yeah, so I had to cut my mother out. So for those that have kind of pieced together little bits throughout the episodes, but for those that don't really know, my mother had been present in my life physically up until I was 19, but mentally she had checked out for almost my whole life. And, oh, no, you're fine. And so when I transferred high schools, the same high school as Krystal, my senior year, we had moved to a house, and around that time is when she had filed for divorce, which personally I was really excited for because all my life I had asked my dad to just get a divorce from my mom because I could not handle having her around. But understandably, he couldn't do that for a multitude of reasons. But when the divorce started happening, there was just a lot of really nasty stuff that had gone down with my mother to the rest of my family. And by the end, when she finally moved out of state, which was 19, so it was like 2 years since the divorce had started, so much had just been caused, so much hurt, a lot of trauma that I had decided, like, I am deciding not to speak to her ever again. And so this is where I also want to tell people, if someone's confiding you about a toxic parent, do not tell them that their feelings aren't valid because they are their parent still. I cannot tell you how that is my biggest pet peeve, how many people have told me, well, she's still your mother. You still need to have a relationship with her, respect her. This is my opinion on it. You don't have to agree with me. This is what I believe. Any person can birth a child, but it takes a special kind of soul to parent them. And, some people aren't meant to be parents. And unfortunately, I think truly that was my mother. But when she was about to move out of state, I told her, I want to speak to you really quickly before we leave. So we got lunch and I said, I apologize for anything I have said, and I'm going to forgive you for everything you've done to me and my family, but I'm setting my boundaries. This is the last time I'm going to see you. And she's like your mom that thinks she's the best person in the world, could not see any wrong, very unself-aware, not self-aware at all, very arrogant. Narcissistic to the definition of it. Not to make this episode like a shit talk thing, but just stating the facts.
Yeah.
And, her thing was she was a good mother and that she's sorry that I felt that way about her, but not about the situation.
It's not an apology.
No. So, my boundary is if she ever wanted to apologize, then maybe we can talk shop and work something out. But it's been 5 years later and I still have not seen her besides a few court appearances that I had to join. We've interacted a few times and having the energy back would drain me and I would regret it immediately because I knew it was just fake. She didn't know how old I was anymore. It was just a huge disconnect. And so when I officially had to cut her off is just a few months ago, like hardcore, like, okay, we're done communicating at all. She had started posting my achievements on her Facebook just as an excuse to post about me, and seeing comments of people congratulating her for my work was really upsetting, because of someone who told me I never would have been able to graduate college or never been successful. It was a huge slap to the face. And so I sent her a long message saying, what you're doing is unacceptable. I'm not going to allow that. Do not post my stuff again. This is the last time we're speaking. And now, honestly, I am really confident and thankful of my boundary and putting my foot down, because I can't tell you how much more at peace I have been the past few years of just not allowing her to walk all over my boundaries or my standards or how I want to react to things, and not get sucked up into her energy. So my advice to people that are in the process of cutting people out, some of the people have reached out to me about the podcast that are going through this right now, it's going to suck. It might be really hard. You probably will get backlash from people, but it's none of their business. You don't have to be concerned of what their opinions are, because they don't know your experience with that toxic parent or relative. And in the day, you have to do what's best for you. And if cutting someone out that doesn't serve you anymore, you're entitled to that decision, and you don't have to feel any guilt or shame about it. And I promise you, once you get past that hump, you're going to feel a lot better. And it's also up to you if you want to change your decision later on in the road. It's up to you. So don't have to feel so scared about a commitment. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Well, that's a pretty good take on it. I've thought about cutting off my mom just because of how terrible I feel just being in the same room. So many times I just can't stand her. But, I feel like I would get so much shit for my family if I were to do that. And I worry that, if I cut off her, I would have to cut off most of my family, because I know most of them would probably back her up. So, if you're not in a position to cut somebody off, simply moving away, distancing yourself from seeing them as often could really, really help. Like, I'm trying to move to the other side of the country so I can be far, far, far away and be able to start living my own life. But, there's no one right way to go about this, no one right way to deal with a toxic family. It's just about learning what you want, and then from there, figuring out what is the best choice for you, what will allow you to propel further and to become the best person that you want to be, however good you want to be. There's so many levels to it.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think also for the people that are the peacekeepers, or in the book, they talk about the caregivers that place all their needs aside for everyone else 24/7, which was also me for a long time. It's going to take a lot of self-reflection and work to realize it's okay to put yourself first sometimes, even most of the time if it's healthy. Don't be a narcissist, don't be selfish, don't be a dick, but if there's times where you feel like, I'm jeopardizing my mental health and my sanity just to please everybody, you're allowed to put yourself first and state your needs and put your foot down. And people might shame you, people might guilt trip you. And if you're in the position to cut them out, like if they're friends, distant relatives, or a significant other, that is your cue that maybe they should be out of the picture. And if it's someone that you can't cut off, it's going to take some time and reflect of ways down the road where you can start creating that distance and create a healthy space between you and that specific person.
Definitely.
I wanted to touch on, since when we first talked about topics in the podcast, you brought up specifically Hispanic or Latin families, because there's a lot that goes into that cultural type of family that other people might not be aware. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so from my experience being a first generation American, I noticed so many differences between the way that my parents parent and other families, just American families parent. And I think one of the biggest differences is the relationship between parent and child. Um, like in my family, when I was a child, I was just seen as property. I wasn't really seen as a person. They didn't really consider my feelings or my thoughts, my wants, and especially now because I'm dating somebody, and he's American. His family has been here for generations. We talk about our childhood, and they're just so vastly different. The childhood that he had growing up and that his sisters had while growing up, there wasn't a difference between genders. They were both treated equally. Actually, recently, I had a conversation with my mom. I don't remember what it was about, but it was about me not being able to do something. And I asked why. Why could I not do it and my brother do it? And she's like, oh, well, because he has a penis, and that's why. And I'm like, but they are always telling me how I'm much more mature, I'm much more stronger, I'm much more kind of gathered in life than he is. And so, but even considering that, well, I'm an adult, I should be able to do what I want, but I still have that need to ask them. But yeah, it's interesting seeing the difference between a Latin household and a non-Latin household. I feel like Latin households really, really value.
Sorry,
You.
Thank you.
I feel like Latin households really value the parentals being authority. What they say is law. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I think a really big thing about Latin households is that they don't view mental illness as something that needs to be managed. They don't view it the same way that they view physical illness. I remember for when I was in high school, I was very, very, very depressed. I had attempted suicide a few times. And then one of my times attempting suicide, after I came back, my parents were just telling me that, like, oh, you were just doing it for the attention. I actually hadn't gone to the hospital because we kind of went to the hospital, but the first time they 5150'd me, and they didn't want them to do that to me again. And I had taken a whole bunch of pills and things like that. And we went to the hospital. They told them that I had stomach problems, but they never actually saw me. So my parents just sent me home and told me to go to bed, and I had taken like so many NyQuil and like different painkillers. I took like a variety of things. And then they sent me to school the next day. And then I was only there for one class, and I could not sit up in my chair. I was completely out of it. And my parents didn't seem to care. They didn't really seem to care that I was so depressed that I literally wanted to end my life. And instead, they decided to turn it around and make it their issue. Because they were like, oh, well, you're out here being all depressed and trying to commit suicide, and you're going to be the reason that we break up and that we get divorced, and trying to use my mental illness as a tool, as a weapon for them. And after that, I stopped doing everything regarding mental health. stopped taking medication. I stopped going to therapy. I shut down. I wouldn't let anybody in. But that's another big thing that Latin families do is they love to take situations and turn it around to make them the victim, which is just so disheartening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not to say that every Latin family is this way. There's some Latin families that are all about family. And
Definitely.
There's those families that I think are really beautiful. But for those that do experience the very unhealthy aspect of Latin families where parents, what they say is that's the law. That's how my mom was. She was very machismo. And so she kind of wanted the machismo role where she could do anything she wanted, but no one else had a say and no one else can do anything. And it was just very interesting to see how her expectations of life, what she expected life would be, and to see how things played out, and just seeing that's really unrealistic. The whole thing with mental health and medications is very real. I think just in general, Latin families don't take mental health seriously, because if you talk about it or want help, it's a sign of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those of the listeners that are Latin or an Hispanic family that have a family that believes in that, you might have to seek help on your own or quietly. And hopefully I hope that you're able to figure out a way to do that. But it's a whole cultural thing of be a man, don't show weakness, don't show any pain. And it's going to take a lot of education from our generation to kind of help show that that's not the case.
And reparenting.
and reparenting. And that goes for outside of Hispanic families too.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's so many of your listeners who could probably relate to this who aren't Latin, and not to say that, every Latin family is like this or every non-Latin family is not like this.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many different kinds of family dynamics, and it's really important to really analyze what your family does, what their toxic traits are, and how you can manage that so that way you put yourself first and you get better.
Mm-hmm.
And if you so decide to want children in the future, what will you do to make sure it's different from that for them? Because for me, that's a very that's something that I'm working on. I feel like that's a big reason why I'm working on myself. I'm not necessarily working on myself for myself. I'm working on myself for other people, for my partner, for my future family, to make sure that I don't hurt somebody else the way that I have been hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is before you want to mention anything else, I wanted to kind of quickly touch on, since you mentioned your boyfriend and
mm-hmm.
the way you're brought up really does affect the way you are with significant others. Like for me, I still struggle with things with intimacy and trusting. And I think that's something that's going to take me a long time to work through. I wonder if you're comfortable sharing what are things you've noticed in your relationship that maybe therapy's helping you work through.
I think one of the biggest things was trust. My mom, she's always been very chismosa. She loves to go through everybody's things, everybody's drawers, everybody's phones. And so growing up, I learned of ways to hide things. And because I knew of ways to hide things when I was in relationships, I was like, oh, if they're cheating on me, they're going to hide it. So how are they going to hide it? And especially in the beginning of my relationship with my boyfriend, I was constantly going through his phone while he was sleeping, while he was out talking to somebody. I would just go really, really quick and be like, okay, who's he Snapchatting? Who's he texting? Who's on Instagram? And he was okay with it because he understood where he understood that I had a lot of trust issues. We had this agreement that we could go through each other's phone, but I feel like I definitely took advantage of that. But as time went on and as I talked more and more with my therapist, she really said, or she really insinuated in me that, he's not everybody else. And, everybody always says that when they're in a relationship. I'm not your ex. I'm not um, somebody in your family who treated you that way. So why are you punishing me for their actions, kind of thing? Um, but for me, it was very, very difficult to not realize that, because to my core, I believed that everybody I came across was going to hurt me in some way and then leave me. And so it took a lot of rework, a lot of understanding where those feelings come from, why they're there, and working on building that trust. And, I was working on little by little, not looking at his phone. I'd get the urge to want to look at his phone, and I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And, it's gotten to the point where now I don't even think about it, because I trust wholeheartedly in what he and I are, and in him as a person, that I've been able to overcome that. But it wasn't easy. It was very, very difficult, and I'm surprised that he stayed with me for that long, because I know so many in my other relationships that would cause such a big issue. But he really didn't allow it to bother him. He saw it as his way of helping me. So I think that's one of the biggest things. Another one is intimacy, but I believe the intimacy part is more from, my own personal past with sexual abuse and things like that, which is something I feel like I'm struggling with now, is being intimate. But yeah, that part, I don't really know how to work on that yet. So I'll let you know when I get there.
Yeah, within that, I think I'm currently still trying to navigate and work through. And I think I've realized, or something I am realizing, is I need, when it comes to like the love languages, physical touch is not my number one. It used to be, until I experienced, trauma and everything. And I realized, like, no, I need words of affirmation. I need acts of service. I need other things first before I feel confident and comfortable to be in a place where I can open myself that way. And so that's something I'm realizing now, trying to understand, okay, how do I declare my needs that way I can be open that way? But yeah, that's never easy. I think that's always going to be something you work through. But, I have faith that you'll get to a place where you get to a healthy spot with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I believe you will as well.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to share with listeners?
I don't think so. I think that's about it. Hopefully I'll see you guys on a future episode about something where I just ramble on. Sorry about that.
Oh no, I thank you for the different things you've shared and the different roles and things to look out for, ways to navigate that. I think that's some tangible steps for listeners out there to kind of have a better way of approaching it, or even like a tool guide, like a stepping stool to start doing their own research. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, we'll definitely have to do future episodes later on.
For sure.
Okay, well, thanks, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and I hope you're able to get something out of it. Maybe it's time to start doing some research, Googling, some self-reflection. The book I've mentioned throughout, I'll link it in the links to whatever platform. I really highly recommend it. And yeah, thank you so much. Good to talk to you.
Nice talking with you too.
All right, bye, guys. See you in the next episode.